The screen lit up under the woman's thumb at 11 at night, and the man standing in her doorway in a $400 coat began to cry. He had driven across 3 counties to reach this kitchen. He had a regional title and a corporate badge and a phone in his pocket that his own company had built, and he had brought it to a folding table in a rented duplex because no one else could fix what was on it. He did not yet know the woman's whole story. He only knew that the photo he thought was gone forever had just come back to life in front of him, and that the hands that brought it back belonged to someone the world had spent years stepping past. Her name was Renata Cole, and for 6 years she had repaired broken phones from the same kitchen table. She was 34. She had 2 boys, Theo, who was 9, and Marcus, who was 6, and a landlord who raised the rent every spring like clockwork. The table where she worked was the same table where the boys ate cereal, the same table where Theo did his homework with his tongue between his teeth, the same table that wobbled on one short leg she had shimmed with a folded coupon. She kept her tools in a fishing tackle box. She kept her patience in a place harder to name. If you have ever handed something precious to a stranger and held your breath while they decided whether to be careful with it, you already understand the kind of trust Renata lived on. Stay with me, because that trust is the whole story. She had not planned to fix phones. Nobody plans a thing like that. 6 years before, she had been a dental office receptionist, married to a man named Devon who drove a delivery route and talked about a house they would buy one day. Then Devon's heart stopped on a Tuesday in the cab of his truck, parked at a loading dock, the engine still running. He was 31. He left her 2 boys, a stack of bills, and a phone with a cracked screen that held the last voicemail he ever sent her. The voicemail was nothing. He had called to ask if they needed milk. That was all. His voice on it was tired and ordinary and alive, and after the funeral Renata played it every night, until the morning the screen finally went black and would not wake. She could not afford to replace the phone. She could not afford to lose the voice. So she sat at the kitchen table with a cheap repair kit she bought for $19 and a video playing on the laptop she had not yet sold, and she taught herself to open the thing without killing what was inside it. It took her 4 nights. Her hands shook the first 3. The screwdriver in the kit was too big for the first screw, and she filed it down with an emery board meant for her nails until it fit. She watched a man on the laptop prior screen with a green plastic tool and a hairdryer, and she did the same with the boy's hairdryer on its lowest setting, holding her breath, easing the blade of a butter knife along the seam a sliver at a time. The first night she cracked the glass worse than it already was, and sat in the dark afterward, certain she had killed the last of Devon. The second night she got it open and could not make sense of what she was looking at, a city of tiny silver and black that meant nothing to her. The third night she touched the wrong thing, and the laptop video told her, too late, that she had shorted a connector. She cried into a dish towel so the boys would not hear. On the 4th night she went slow. She went so slow that the toast burned and she did not care. She lifted the battery the way the man on the laptop did, and she cleaned a green crust off 2 copper pads with a cotton swab and a drop of vinegar, and she pressed the loose connector home until it clicked, and she put the screen back, and she pressed the button. The screen lit up, and Devon's voice came out of the little speaker asking about milk, and Renata put her face down on the table and wept until Theo came out of the bedroom and patted her back and asked if she was sick. That was where it started. A woman saving a voice. Word travels in a neighborhood that cannot afford them all. A cousin had a cracked screen. The cousin told the co-worker. The co-worker had a daughter whose phone had gone for a swim. Within a year, Renata had a reputation on 3 streets and a Saturday list that ran longer than her arm. She charged $40 for a screen, $60 for a battery, $90 for the jobs that made other shops shrug and say the phone was dead. She almost never said a phone was dead. She had learned the hard way, on a Tuesday, that people do not come to her for glass. They come to her for what is trapped behind it. She remembered the first stranger who knocked. A woman named Olga from 2 streets over who stood on the step holding a phone in a plastic sandwich bag of rice and would not meet Renata's eyes. The phone had gone through the wash. Inside it were the only pictures Olga had of her mother, who had passed in the spring, and the store at the mall had quoted her $300 and a shrug. Renata sat her down at the kitchen table and gave her coffee and opened the phone under the lamp. While Olga twisted a paper napkin into a rope, it took an afternoon. The corrosion was bad. Renata cleaned it pad by pad and dried it and coaxed it back. And when the pictures came up, a heavy old woman laughing on a porch in a yellow dress, Olga made a sound Renata had made herself once, into a dish towel, and tried to give her every dollar in her purse. Renata took 40. That was the day she understood what her kitchen table had become, and she never charged a grieving person more than the price of the part. Again, she kept a notebook of every job. Not for taxes, though she paid those too. Carefully, in a county where plenty of people in her trade did not. She kept the notebook because every phone had a person behind it, and she liked to remember them. A grandmother's last text messages, a son deployed overseas whose photos lived nowhere else, a wedding nobody had thought to back up. Renata was not fixing electronics. She was running a small, quiet rescue service for the things people could not bear to lose, and she ran it for $40 a screen out of a kitchen that smelled like the morning's toast. What she did not know on the night this story turns toward was that one of those rescues had already travelled further than her street, further than her county, into a glass office building where a man with a title was about to lose the only thing he had left of his daughter. His name was Gerald Pratt. He was 56, a regional manager for the company whose logo sat on half the phones in America, the silver fruit with the bite taken out. He had worked for them for 22 years. He had a corner office with a view of a parking structure, a salary that had bought a house he was now alone in, and a reputation among the people under him as a man who measured everything and felt nothing. They were wrong about the feeling. They had simply never seen the room where he kept it. Gerald had a daughter named Lily. She had been 24. She had died 11 months before this story, in a car on a wet highway on her way home from a job she loved. And the last full conversation Gerald ever had with her had been an argument about money he could not now remember the shape of. What he remembered was that he had been short with her. What he remembered was that he had not called back to apologize, because he was busy, because there would be time, because there is always time until the morning there is not. Lily had sent him a video 3 days before she died. He had glanced at it on a Tuesday between meetings, a 14-second clip of her laughing in her apartment about something her cat had done, and he had typed back a thumbs-up emoji and gone back to work. He had meant to watch it properly later. Later came and he watched it 40 times a week, and then one ordinary morning, 11 months after the funeral, his phone slipped from his hand onto the tile of his own bathroom floor, and the screen filled with a spider of cracks and went dark and would not come back. He did what a regional manager does. He called his own company. He had it taken to the flagship store he himself oversaw, the one with the marble floor and the bright wood tables and the staff in matching shirts. A young technician with careful hands and a careful voice took the phone into the back and ran the diagnostics, and Gerald stood at the bright wood table and watched the minute hand of his own watch and told himself it was a formality. When the technician came back, he was holding the phone the way you hold something you are about to hand to a grieving person, flat on both palms. He set it down. He said the logic board had failed. He said the device was not recoverable. He said the data was gone. He said, and here his voice dropped into the gentle register people use, with grief they can sense but cannot see, that Gerald really should have backed it up to the cloud, that there were ways to make sure this never happened again, that he was so sorry. He had not backed it up to the cloud. Lily had teased him about that very thing, his refusal to trust the cloud, his insistence on keeping things where he could touch them. You and your shoebox, she used to say. You and your filing cabinet. Who keeps things on a phone like it's a vault? Dad? Now the only place her last laughter lived was a dead rectangle of aluminum in his hand, and the best technicians his own company employed had told him it could not be saved. Gerald sat in his car in the parking structure that afternoon and did not drive anywhere. For a long time he might have given up. Most people would have. A man does not run a region for 22 years, though, without learning that the official answer and the only answer are not always the same thing. So he did something a regional manager almost never does. He asked the lowest paid person in the building. Her name was Brittany, and she swept the store and emptied the bins and was usually invisible to the men in suits. Gerald found her in the back, and he asked her plainly if she knew anyone at all, who could do what the geniuses at the Brightwood tables had said could not be done. Brittany looked at him for a moment, deciding whether he was the kind of man who would use the answer to mock her. Then she wrote a name and a street on the back of a receipt. "There is a woman," Brittany said. "He fixed my mother's phone when the store told us to buy a new one. She works out of her house. She is the best I ever saw, and she will not lie to you about what she can do." Gerald looked at the receipt. A street he had never driven down. A first name. He almost threw it away. Then he thought of the 14 seconds of his daughter laughing, and he put the receipt in his breast pocket, and he did not throw it away. It took him 2 weeks to use it. 2 weeks of telling himself it was foolish that a corporate man with a regional title would not go knocking on a stranger's door in a part of town his colleagues joked about, that the technicians were right and the data was gone. 2 weeks of opening the dead phone every morning and pressing the power button as if this would be the day it relented. It never relented. He called the number Brittany had written under the name. A woman answered on the 4th ring. A child's voice somewhere behind her asking about dinner. Gerald explained stiffly that he had a phone the store had declared dead, that he understood she sometimes worked on such things, that he would pay whatever it cost. There was a pause on the line. Then the woman said, in a voice that was tired but not unkind, that she could not promise anything, that some phones really were gone, but that he could bring it by after the boys were asleep, and she would look. That was how Gerald Pratt came to be standing in Renata's kitchen doorway at 10:30 on a Thursday night, holding a dead phone in a coat that cost more than her monthly rent, feeling foolish and desperate in equal measure. The kitchen was small and clean and smelled of toast and dish soap. There was a folding table under a hanging lamp, a fishing tackle box open beside it, a magnifying lamp clamped to the edge. There were 2 small jackets on hooks by the door, one blue, one with a dinosaur on it. There was a crayon drawing taped to the refrigerator of a tall figure and 3 short ones under a yellow sun. Gerald looked at the drawing longer than he meant to. Renata took the phone from him, the way a nurse takes a newborn, both hands, careful of the head. She turned it over under the lamp. She pressed the button he had pressed 1,000 times. Nothing. She did not seem discouraged. She set it on a square of soft blue cloth and looked up at him. "Tell me what's on it," she said. Gerald had not expected that question. The technicians at the store had never asked it. They asked for his passcode and his cloud login and his patience. They did not ask what was on it. He stood in the small kitchen and found that his voice would not work for a moment. Then he said, "My daughter, a video of my daughter. She passed last year. It is the last one I have." Renata nodded slowly. She did not say she was sorry in the bright, empty way strangers do. She looked at the dead phone on the blue cloth for a moment as if it had just become something else, something heavier. Then she said, "I'll do everything I know how to do. I won't lie to you about the odds. I will tell you the truth at the end, whatever it is. Sit down. There's coffee if you want it." He sat. He did not want coffee, but she poured him a cup anyway in a mug with a faded cartoon on it, and the ordinary kindness of it loosened something in his chest he had been holding clenched for 11 months. She told him it would not be tonight. These were not screen jobs, she said. A failed board meant going in deep, lifting the memory itself, reading it on a rig she had built from parts and patience over 3 years of Saturdays. She had pulled photos off phones that had been in-house fires. She had pulled a man's whole life off a phone his ex-wife had thrown in a lake. She could promise nothing. She could promise, though, that she would try the way she would want someone to try for her. Then she said something Gerald would remember for the rest of his life. She said, "I lost a voice once. I know what it is to have somebody trapped behind glass. I won't be careless with her." He left the phone on the blue cloth. He drove home through empty streets and slept, for the first time in months, without opening his hand at 3 in the morning to press a button on a phone that would not wake. It took Renata 6 nights. She worked. After the boys went down under the magnifying lamp, with the little house silent around her, the board was bad. One of the chips that held the memory had cracked solder beneath it, a hairline fracture that no diagnostic at a bright wood table would ever bother to chase because chasing it took hours and the official answer was already written. Renata chased it. The first night she only looked. She put the board under the lamp at the highest magnification and went over it the way a doctor reads an X-ray, an inch at a time, until she found the place where the light caught a seam that should not have been there, a thread of darkness under one corner of the memory chip where the solder had let go. She marked it in her notebook and went to bed and did not sleep, turning the problem over the way she used to turn over the rent. The second night she lifted the chip. This was the part that killed phones. The part the store would never risk on a clock. She set her heat to a number she had learned on a dozen ruined practice boards, and she watched the tiny silver beads at the chip's feet go from dull to wet, and she slid it free with tweezers and laid it on a square of cloth as if it were a tooth she meant to keep. Under the lamp she cleaned each contact, 40 of them, smaller than grains of sand, with a brush of one bristle and a solvent that smelled like a hospital. On the fourth night she got the rig to read. The rig was a homely tangle of wire and a salvaged reader and a board. She had etched herself at this table over 3 years of Saturdays, and it looked like nothing, and it worked like nothing else for 2 counties. She seated the clean chip in it and held her breath and watched the laptop. For a long moment there was an error she knew too well. She reseated the chip. She breathed on her cold fingers. She tried again, and the laptop stopped arguing and began to think, a small bar crawling across the screen the way the kettle takes its time when you are watching it. On the 6th night, the data came up on her laptop in a long, cold list of file names and dates, and there, near the end, was a video 14 seconds long, recorded 11 months before a date Renata now knew by heart, and she did not open it. It was not hers to open. She copied it, and everything else, onto a clean drive, and she soldered the chip back to its place on the board with a hand that did not shake anymore, and she rebuilt the phone around its rescued memory, and she charged it, and she pressed the button. The screen lit up, the little fruit glowed. The phone that the best technicians in the region had pronounced dead came back to life on a folding table, shimmed with a folded coupon, in a kitchen that smelled of toast, in the hands of a woman the store had never heard of. Renata called the number. She said, 3 words. It's done. It's all here. Gerald drove across 3 counties that night without remembering a single mile of it. He stood in her doorway again and she handed him the phone. Alive. And she said, "Your daughter's video is still there. Right where she left it. I never opened it. It's yours." She had thought about whether to warn him, whether a man should brace before he hears a voice he has not heard in 11 months. She decided against it. Some things you do not get to prepare for and should not have to. She simply put it in his hands and stepped back to give him room. And Gerald, regional manager, 22 years, the man who measured everything and felt nothing, looked down at 14 seconds of his daughter laughing about her cat in her apartment with the light coming through the window behind her, and he heard her voice for the first time in 11 months, and his knees did not quite hold him. And he sat down hard on a folding chair in a stranger's kitchen and wept into his own hands, while the screen played her laughter on a loop. He could not bring himself to stop. He watched it once. He watched it again. He pressed his thumb to the glass over her face as if he could feel it, and the third time it played he laughed, a broken, wet laugh, because the thing her cat had done really was funny. And he had forgotten that. He had been grieving so hard, he had forgotten that the clip was funny and that she had sent it to make him smile on a Tuesday between meetings. Renata did not rush him. She had been on the other side of that table. She poured him coffee in the mug with a faded cartoon, and she sat across from him, and she let him have his daughter back for as long as he needed. When he could speak, he asked what he owed her. She told him $90, the same as any deep job. $90 to bring his daughter's laugh back from a place his own company had said was beyond reach. Gerald looked at her across the wobbling table. $90. He had spent more than that on the dinner where he had argued with Lily about money he could no longer remember. He took out his wallet and he did not pay her $90. He left every bill he had on the table, which was more than $400, and Renata pushed most of it back across the cloth and said the price was $90, and she would not take advantage of a grieving man. And that small refusal, that stubborn dignity over a folding table at midnight. was the moment Gerald stopped seeing a repair lady and started seeing the most honest person he had met in 22 years. He took the 90, he left the rest where she pushed it back, he drove home with his daughter alive in his pocket. And somewhere on that drive, between the empty intersections and the sleeping houses, a regional manager began to do the math of his whole career and find it short. He thought about the technicians at the Brightwood table who had told him the data was gone, not because they were cruel but because the official answer was already written, and chasing the hairline crack took hours the schedule did not allow. He thought about how many Lileys had walked out of his stores carrying dead ferns, and the soft, careful lie that nothing could be done. He thought about a woman who chased the crack anyway for $90 in a kitchen because somebody had to. The next morning, Gerald did something a regional manager had never done in the history of his region. He pulled the service numbers. He did not need a study. He had a name on the back of a receipt and a video of his daughter to tell him the truth. The numbers only confirmed. The official answer was written to protect the schedule, not the person. And the person, every time, was somebody standing at a Brightwood table, holding the only copy of a voice, a face, a wedding, a last ordinary afternoon. He could have left it there. A grateful man, a good story to tell, a generous tip refused. Most men would have. Gerald, though, had watched his daughter's killer, which was not a drunk driver, but his own assumption that there would always be time, and he had decided he was done assuming there would be time to fix the things he saw broken. He went back to Renata's kitchen a third time, not with a phone, with a question. He sat at the folding table and he asked her how many phones a week the world told her were dead that she brought back to life. She thought about it. Most weeks, she said, 3 or 4, sometimes more around the holidays, when people dropped them. She kept the notebook, she said, and she showed him. 6 years of it. And Gerald turned the pages slowly and read the small, careful entries. A grandmother's texts, a son overseas, a wedding nobody backed up, a woman named Olga, and a heavy old woman laughing on a porch in a yellow dress. A voicemail about milk, the very first one, in handwriting that had not yet learned to stop shaking. He stopped on a page near the middle and asked about an entry that said only, "Soldier, deleted by mistake, gave them back." Renata remembered it. A boy of 19 had wiped his phone, trying to fix it himself, and lost a year of messages from his unit, friends, some of whom were no longer alive to send new ones. She had gone in and pulled the deleted fragments back, pieces at a time, and stitched them into something he could read. He had stood in her kitchen and saluted her, she said, half joking and half not, and she had not known what to do with her hands. Gerald read the entry again and put his finger on it, and did not speak for a while. He asked her why she did not charge more. People would pay anything for what she pulled back. He said she could name her price. Renata looked at him for a long moment. Then she said the thing that he would later repeat in a conference room 16 floors above a city to people who had spent their whole careers calculating margin. She said, because the price of the thing and the worth of the thing are not the same. The screen costs $40. The voice on it is the only one of its kind in the world. I charge for the screen. I would be ashamed to put a number on the voice. Gerald drove home and did not sleep, but for a different reason than before. What he proposed 3 weeks later, in the glass building with the parking structure view, was not charity. He was careful about that, because he had learned over a midnight coffee that the woman would push charity back across the table the way she had pushed back $400. What he proposed was a job, and then more than a job. A new role, region-wide, and then larger, for a deep recovery service. His stores had never offered because the schedule had never allowed it. A program built around the simple radical idea that some phones the diagnostic called dead were not dead, only difficult, and that difficult was worth an afternoon when what was trapped behind the glass was the last of someone. He proposed that Renata Cole train it, build it, run it. He proposed a salary with a number on it that she made him repeat twice, because she was certain she had misheard. She had not misheard. It did not happen overnight, and it did not happen without doubt. There were men in the glass building who looked at a woman who fixed phones at a kitchen table and saw a liability. a story that would not survive a spreadsheet. One of them, a younger executive named Dale, who ran the numbers for the region, said it plainly in the meeting. He said a kitchen table operation could not scale, that there was a reason the diagnostic was standardized, that they could not have technicians chasing every hairline crack on the company's clock, that the math did not work. He said it the way men say things they have never had to test against a person sitting across a wobbling table at midnight. Gerald sat them down and showed them the notebook. He did not show them margin projections first. He had photographed the pages with his own phone, the one Renata had brought back, and he put a single page up on the screen 16 floors above the city, and it said, in handwriting that had not yet learned to stop shaking, voicemail about milk, and under it a date. He let the room read it. Then he told them whose handwriting it was and what had happened in the cab of a truck at a loading dock with the engine still running, and he told them the woman had taught herself to save that voice over 4 nights with a $19 kit, and that she now did for strangers for $40 what the room had decided could not be done at all. He let the silence sit. Dale looked at the page and did not say anything about scale. Then he showed them the margin projections, which were, also, as it happened, very good, because it turned out people were willing to drive across 3 counties and tell everyone they knew about the place that brought their dead back to life. The numbers did the rest of the work the page had started. The program was approved before lunch. Renata took the job. She negotiated one condition, and only one, and she would not move on it. The Deep Recovery Service would never tell a person their data was gone until somebody had actually chased the crack. No careful lie to protect the schedule. If a phone could not be saved, the customer would hear it from a technician who had truly tried, and they would hear the truth, whatever it was. It was the same promise she had made Gerald in her kitchen on a Thursday night. She built a whole department on it. The boys did not understand, at first, why their mother no longer worked at the kitchen table. Theo, who was 9 and noticed everything, asked if they were rich now. Renata laughed and said, "No, baby, we are not rich, but we are going to be all right, and there is a difference, and one day you will know it." Marcus, who was 6, asked only whether he could still have cereal at the same table, and seemed satisfied when she said yes. They moved out of the duplex with the rent that rose every spring. On the last morning, Renata walked through the empty rooms and stood for a while in the kitchen, at the spot where the table had stood, where the shimmed leg had left 4 small dents in the linoleum from 6 years of leaning into the lamp. She pressed her thumb into one of the dents and thought about the woman who had sat there crying into a dish towel on the 3rd night, certain she had killed the last of Devon, and she wished she could reach back across the years and tell that woman to go slow on the 4th night, that it was going to be all right, that the table was going to save more people than she could count. They moved into a small house with a room for each boy and a kitchen with a table that did not wobble. Renata kept the old folding table anyway. She set it up in the corner of the new garage, with the fishing tackle box and the magnifying lamp and the homely rig of wire and salvage parts. And on Saturdays she still fixed a few phones for the people on the old streets, for $40 a screen, because some things you do not stop doing just because you no longer have to. A year into the new life, Gerald came to dinner. He came often now. He had become, in a way neither of them quite said out loud, family, the kind that grief and gratitude make when blood is gone. He sat at the table that did not wobble and ate with the boys and laughed at Marcus's joke about a dog, and at the end of the night he asked Renata if she still had the very first phone, hers, the one with the voicemail about milk. She did. She kept it in a drawer, retired now, its rescued voice long since copied to safer places, but she could not bring herself to part with the actual object, the thing her shaking hands had opened on the worst nights of her life. She had wrapped it in the same square of soft blue cloth she used for every job, and it lay in the drawer beneath the dish towels like something sleeping. She brought it out and set it on the table. He turned it over in his hands the way Renata had turned over his own phone on the first night, careful of a thing that could not be replaced. Then he told her something he had never told anyone. He told her that the night she handed his daughter back to him, alive in his hands, was the night he stopped being angry at himself for the thumbs-up emoji. He had carried that emoji like a stone for a year. He said the cheapness of it, 14 seconds of his daughter reaching out to make him laugh, and a single lazy thumb in return. He had thought that was the measure of him. Not because she had erased it, he said, because she had shown him that the people who fix the broken things do not ask whether you deserved to lose them. They just try to bring them back. And if a woman at a kitchen table could chase a hairline crack for $90 to save a stranger's daughter, then maybe, he said, maybe a man could forgive himself for being busy on a Tuesday. Because being busy on a Tuesday is not a crime, it is only the most human thing there is, and the answer to it is not punishment. It is to do better with the time you have left. Renata reached across the table that did not wobble and put her hand over his. She did not tell him he was forgiven because that was not hers to give, and she knew the difference. She only said that Lily had sent him the clip to make him smile, and that the surest way to waste it now would be to refuse to. He nodded. He wiped his face with the back of his hand the way the boys did, and Marcus, watching from across the table, handed him a paper napkin without a word. And the kindness of a 6-year-old undid him a second time. Theo and Marcus grew up in a house where a man who ran a region came to dinner and cried sometimes at the end of the night, and where their mother had taught a whole company that the price of a thing and the worth of a thing are not the same. Theo, the one who noticed everything, decided at 15 that he would learn to do what his mother did, and she taught him at the old folding table in the garage. His tongue between his teeth, the way it had been over his homework, his hands steady the way hers had become. Have you ever held the only copy of someone's voice in your hand and been told by the people who should know that it was gone for good? If you have, you know exactly what Renata gave Gerald across a midnight table for $90. She almost did not take. Years later, when the Deep Recovery Service had spread to stores in cities Renata had never visited, a reporter asked her what she was proudest of. The reporter expected the salary, the title, the program with her name quietly on it. Renata thought about it. Then she said the thing that made the reporter stop writing and just listen. She said she was proudest that her boys had grown up watching a stranger get his daughter back at their kitchen table. That they had seen young, that the work you do when nobody important is watching is exactly the work that turns out to matter most. That a wobbling table in a rented duplex had been, all along, a place where the broken things came to be made whole, and that she had not known, on the worst nights of her own life, that she was building something her sons would one day be proud to inherit. The old folding table still stands in the garage. The fishing tackle box still holds the tools. On Saturday mornings, if you drove down the right street, you might see a light on, and a woman and her grown son bent over a magnifying lamp, careful with something small in their hands, chasing a crack the world had given up on. She never did put a number on the voice. She only ever charged for the screen. And the man in the $400 coat, the regional manager who brought her his dead phone on a Thursday night, kept 14 seconds of his daughter laughing in his pocket for the rest of his life, and never once pressed the power button at 3 in the morning, afraid it would not wake. Because a woman at a kitchen table had taught him the difference between a thing that is gone and a thing that is only hard to reach. If this story moved you, think of the one voice you would drive across 3 counties to save and hold on to it a little tighter tonight. And if you want another story about the quiet people who fix what the world calls broken, there is one waiting about a night shift janitor and the envelope he was never supposed to open.